Jackson Radio Show.
What's up, everybody? Kevin Jackson here. I got to tell you, by the way, welcome to the Kevin Jackson Show. KJRadio.com, 844-551-8255. So, we're getting the new studio set up. I know we got some sound issues. We'll resolve that, so bear with us. Lots going on. I'm still tired. I'm not going to lie to you. 3 days of just the most horrendous. I mean, I lifted more weights in the last 3 days than I've done probably in the last year. It's been crazy getting furniture moved and stuff like that, and still got a lot to do in St. Louis and around the and then I've got a trip in between with a good friend of mine who is invited me to go on a fishing trip. And so I got to get Brett to do some shows next week. And then I've got to probably do a best of here because I'm not sure exactly the dates I'm going to be back. But it's one of my big benefactors. He's a guy that's kind of like a big brother to me. And he's a very well-known philanthropist to the conservative movement. And he invited me to go fishing with 29 other guys. And the only stipulation was my birth certificate had to have male on it. And I had to represent my birth certificate in showing up. So in other words, I can't be transgendered or anything on this trip. But it's so funny because they asked me for my bio. And long story short, in between all these other big things that are going on, I've got this trip planned. It was in the middle of the busiest time I could even imagine because of just everything going on in my life these days. And then I got to come back and I've got to do some work for Fox that's pretty heavy because of things that are going on up there. So I feel like I'm phoning it in today. And part of the reason is there were so many things going on in the news cycle that I missed. And and I don't know what you consider to be the biggest stories that happened over the past week or so. But there are quite a few of them. And I think we've done a pretty good, I'm not going to be too hard on myself. I think we've done a decent job. But I'm telling you, today, I'm just ragged. I've been run ragged. I drove 1,500 miles with my dog. And I must admit, he did really well. That little rascal just laid down in the truck like he was a trucker's dog. And then I had one stretch where he decided he was going to just bomb me. I mean, he was just breaking wind. It was like 180 miles of, oh my God. And the trucks don't have automatic windows. You got to roll down. You got to roll down the glass. And there's a funny story. So if you've never driven by a cattle, particularly a dairy farm, you haven't lived. It's just crazy. It is the worst smell. I can't describe it other than it has a bit of a flavor of dying flesh. And it's horrible, but it smells suspiciously like my dog's, breaking wind, to be delicate about it. So we're on this stretch of road where he's farting. Okay, I'm just going to say the word. And I'm going, come on, dude. And I'm rolling down the window. I probably did this 6 times in about, 15-mile stretch. And he wasn't eating very much on the road at all. So I don't know where it was coming from. But, I gave him a dentist stick earlier that morning. And at that point, I cut him off of dentist sticks. But here's the funny part. So we're driving by this cattle ranch. It's a big a dairy farm. We're driving by, and the smell hits, and I'm like, oh, and I'm rolling down the window, and the dog looks up, and I look over at him like, dude. And then I look over and I go, oh, shoot, it's a dairy farm. And he's looking at me like, see, there you go, blaming a brother. It was so funny to see the look in his eyes like, I didn't do that. And in fact, I think he probably smelled it before we, because this smells better than mine, his sense of smell. So he's smelling it, and he looks up. And when he looked up, I'm thinking, oh, he who smelt it dealt it. And so I'm like chastising him. Come on, dude. And then we kept going, and it lingered far too long after I rolled down the window. In fact, it got worse. And then I look over and see the cattle. And, of course, it's a dairy farm. And I know exactly what they smell like because I grew up around them. And I was like, oh, crap. But it was such a funny story. Anyway, he forgave me. I forgave him. And we cruised on down the road. Oh, my goodness. Hey, so I was giving you some Trump stats a while back. And you're going to hear a lot of these, not just from me, but from many people. And here's what I will tell you. I love what Trump is doing. Yeah, we mentioned that he fired, I think it was 500 people from the VA, right? Anybody that, I think he fired, like if you had bad marks on your record, if you were a criminal, whatever, he fired 500 folks, which is 499 more than Barack Obama, than Barry. But he's fired 11,000 federal employees in his first 6 months. He's draining the swamp, as promised. And let me tell you something. If 30% of federal government employees didn't show up for work tomorrow or whatever day they work, nobody would miss them. And I know you guys are going, Kevin, you're trying to be funny. It's a bit hyperbolic. No, nobody would miss. If 30% of the people that work in the federal government didn't show up, the other 70% of this government could operate with the same level of efficiency, maybe better. As a candidate, Trump promised to drain the swamp of entrenched government workers, and he's been doing that. And the government executive reported, this is a periodical, first 6 months, he slashed 11,000 federal jobs, reversing the trend that Obama had, where the number of federal workers increased. The July jobs report showed that 2,700 federal jobs were cut in the month of July. So the total number is 10,700. Now, I want to go into what the other people have done during this same time. So let's look at what Obama did. First 6 months in office, he added more than 60,000 federal jobs. Former President Bush increased the federal workforce by 36,000 jobs in his first 6 months. So I want to contrast that with what Trump is doing. Trump has gone less by almost 11,000 in the first 6 months less. Bush added 36,000. Obama, on top of that, added an additional 60,000. Now, the government has roughly 2.2 million people who work for the government. Largest company in the world. Or certainly largest company in America. I think Walmart has 1.2 or 1.5 million employees. But see, this is the right way to do this. I hope that by the end of the year, his first year, Donald Trump has cut the budget by at least, in terms of employees, has cut at least 100,000 people from the government.
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.